Welcome to the Planning Your Summer Food Service Program Meal Service Training for the Summer Food Service Program hosted by the Oregon Department of Education Child Nutrition Programs. In this training, we will review information on different methods to provide meals, meal pattern requirements for the meals you serve, what to do with leftovers, meal service requirements, and food safety rules. Before ODE-CMP approves the program application, a sponsor will have to indicate the method it will use to provide meals to children. Several factors such as the cost of food, the number of meals required, and type of meal service, the number and type of meal sites, community dietary preferences, and the facilities available at each site will influence the sponsor's choice. Sponsors may choose from several methods of providing meals. Sponsors may prepare and assemble their own meals, obtain meals from a school food authority, or obtain meals from a food service management company. Many sponsors choose to prepare their own meals, which provide them with maximum control over the quality of preparation. Depending on the facilities available at its sites, a sponsor may prepare meals at each site location or at a central kitchen. Preparing meals at the site requires that each site have adequate kitchen and storage facilities. Sponsors preparing meals at a central kitchen must decide how to distribute the meals from the central kitchen to the sites and safely deliver and store them until meal service. If sponsors choose not to prepare meals for sites, they may enter into agreement to purchase meals from a school food service facility. Most schools have meal preparation and service facilities since they serve meals to children during the school year. Also, experienced school food service personnel are often available for summer jobs. Sponsors that wish to obtain SFSP meals from a school should contact the local superintendent of schools or the principals of a local nonprofit private schools. SFA sponsors who participate in the NSLP or SBP at any time during the year may substitute the meal pattern requirements of the NSLP and SBP respectively for the SFSP meal pattern requirements for meals served at school sites. ODE-CMP approval of this substitution is not required. However, meals served at non-school sites using the NSLP or SBP meal pattern requirements by a SFA sponsor require ODE-CMP agency approval. In the SFSP, the term Food Service Management Company is defined slightly different than in other child nutrition programs. In SFSP, this means any commercial enterprise or nonprofit organization with which a sponsor may contract for preparing unitized meals with or without milk for use in the program or for managing a sponsor's food service operations in accordance with the limitations set forth in the program regulations on management responsibilities of sponsors. All SFSP sponsors may choose to contract with a food service management company or with a school to obtain their meals. Generally, sponsors may not contract with a school using a food service management company unless the school's request for proposal, invitation for bid, and/or the contract with the food service management company include the provision of SFSP meals. Food service management companies and school food authorities contracting to prepare SFSP meals must provide unitized meals to the sponsor's sites unless ODE-CMP has approved a waiver of the unitized meal requirement. The unitized meal requirement specifies that the meal components, except juice or milk, must be packaged, delivered, and served as a unit. Milk or juice, which may be packaged and provided separately, must be served with the meal, and only such complete meals are reimbursable. Sponsors eligible to receive USDA foods, donated commodities under SFSP include sponsors preparing meals on site or at a central kitchen, sponsors purchasing meals from a school food authority that participates in the NSLP, and SFA sponsors that procure their SFSP meals from the same food service management company that competitively provided their most recent NSLP and/or SBP meals. ODE-CMP will provide information about currently available commodities to all eligible sponsors. Meal services can be operated by different sponsors at a site. However, the site may not exceed the maximum number of meals allowed under the regulations. For example, if a sponsor is approved to serve only lunch at a site, a different sponsor may be approved to serve breakfast or a snack at the same site, as long as the total number and type of meal services served at the site does not exceed the maximum allowed under the regulations. With ODE C&P approval, sponsors may serve up to 2 meals or 1 meal and 1 snack each day. Allowable meal combinations for open sites include, but are not limited to, breakfast only, lunch only, snack only, supper only, lunch and snack, breakfast and lunch. The only meal combination that may not be approved for reimbursement at an open or closed enrolled site is lunch and supper. This is due to these meals having the highest and the same reimbursement rate. With ODE C&P approval, camp or migrant site sponsors may serve up to 3 meals each day or 2 meals and 1 snack. Allowable meal combinations include breakfast, lunch, and supper, breakfast, lunch, and snack, lunch, supper, and snack. Any combination of meals and snacks that is less than the maximum number of meals allowed. It is important for the success of an SFSP program to serve nutritious meals that meet meal planning requirements and that are appetizing to children. Careful menu planning is necessary to meet this goal. The meal planning requirements assure well-balanced meals that supply the kinds and amounts of foods that children require to help meet their nutrient and energy needs. The meal planners establish the minimum portions of the various meal components that must be served to each child in order for the participating sponsor to receive reimbursement for each meal. You can find the SFSP meal pattern on ODE C&P's public website. For breakfast to be a reimbursable meal, it must contain 1 serving of milk, 1 serving of a vegetable or fruit or full-strength juice, and 1 serving of a grain or bread. A meat or meat alternate is optional. For lunch or supper to be a reimbursable meal, it must contain 1 serving of milk, 2 or more servings of vegetables and/or fruits, 1 serving of grain or bread, and a meat or meat alternate. For a snack to be a reimbursable meal, it must contain 2 food items. Each item must be from a different food component. However, juice cannot be served when milk is served as the only other component. Sponsors are not required to accommodate dietary preferences, but are encouraged to do so within the existing meal patterns. However, sponsors are required to make substitutions or modifications to the meal patterns for participants with disabilities who are unable to consume the regular program meals when such substitutions are supported by a statement from a recognized medical authority that includes the required alternate foods. Schools participating in SFSP or Seamless Summer Option may offer a non-dairy milk substitute to a student with a medical or special dietary need other than a disability. Schools choosing to offer this option must follow a parent's request to have the milk substitute served to his or her child. Schools must receive a written request from a medical authority or parent or guardian that identifies the student's medical or dietary reason for needing a milk substitute in order to serve the child that substitute. Any reasonable reason for requesting that a milk substitute be served will be acceptable. Only milk substitutes that meet USDA's nutrient requirements may be served in order to receive reimbursement for these meals. Schools that decide not to offer milk substitutions for children with medical or special dietary needs must communicate this decision to all households. For medical statement forms and guidance, visit the ODE C&P Special Dietary Needs webpage. Meal patterns specify the minimum portion for each food component for each meal or snack. Because an infant's first year dietary needs are based on individual development and may be more complicated than those for toddlers and older children, sponsors must receive prior approval from ODE C&P to serve meals to infants 1 year of age and younger. All meals served to infants must comply with the infant meal pattern requirements in Section 226.20b of the CACFP regulations. SFSP regulations allow for the adjusting of meal portion sizes for children ages 1 to 6 years old. The sponsor must demonstrate to ODE-C&P that it can control portion sizes and follow the age-appropriate meal pattern requirements for children in Section 226.20C of the CACFP regulations. Because teenagers have greater food needs, sponsors may serve adult-sized portions to children ages 12 to 18 years old. Also, as a reminder, extra food may always be served to improve the nutrition of participating children, that is, in addition to the food necessary to meet the meal pattern requirements. Offer versus serve, or OVS, is a concept that applies to menu planning and meal service, which allows children to decline some of the food offered in a reimbursable breakfast, lunch, or supper, excluding snacks. The goals of OVS are to simplify program administration and reduce food waste and costs while maintaining the nutritional integrity of the SFSP meal that is served. Currently, the ability for all types of SFSP sponsors to use OVS is pending waiver approval from the USDA. OVS is not required, but is an option for SFA sponsors. Utilizing OVS does not preclude the sponsor from maintaining a nonprofit food service operation. For a meal to be eligible for reimbursement for a school food authority sponsor, all food components in the required minimum serving sizes must be offered. A food component is one of the food groups that comprise a reimbursable meal. Sites must always offer all food components that comprise a reimbursable meal in at least the minimum required amounts and follow the NSLP meal pattern. A food item is a specific food offered within the food components comprising the reimbursable meal. For example, a half cup of strawberries and a half cup of 100% orange juice are two food items that comprise one component, the fruit component. Pending waiver approval from the USDA, all non-school sponsors electing to use OVS and schools participating in SFSP and electing to follow the SFSP meal patterns are required to follow the SFSP OVS requirements. Due to the distinguishing factor of the SFSP and NSLP, including variations in settings and resources, the OVS requirements in SFSP are different from the OVS requirements in NSLP. In order to ensure that children receiving enough food to meet their nutritional needs, OVS requirements in SFSP are as follows. In breakfast, 3 food components are required for a reimbursable breakfast: 1 serving of fruit or vegetable, 1 serving of bread or bread alternate, and 1 serving of fluid milk. All components listed must be offered through at least 4 different food items for OVS and SFSP. The 4th food item offered can be a serving of fruit, vegetable, bread or bread alternate, or meat alternate. A child must take at least 3 of the 4 food items. Pending waiver approval from the USDA, when OVS for lunch or supper in SFSP meal pattern, 4 food components are required for a reimbursable lunch or supper: 1 serving of meat or meat alternate, 2 servings of fruit and or vegetables from 2 different food items, 1 serving of bread or bread alternate, and 1 serving of fluid milk. All sponsors must plan, prepare, or order meals with the objective of providing 1 meal per child at each meal service and must ensure that entire meals and food components that are not left over and unusable. Sponsors should minimize the amount of waste of unusable leftovers. Some suggestions for avoiding loss, or at least reducing the amount of loss, are: sponsors should be monitoring site reports on the number of attending children and the number of meals delivered to reduce waste and cost. A limited number of second meals served as a unit can be claimed for reimbursement as long as the total number of second meals does not exceed 2% of the first meal served by the sponsor for all sites during the claiming period. Extra meals can be transferred if allowed by the local health code from a site with too many meals to a site with a shortage, keeping in mind that meals in excess of the receiving site's approved meal level are not reimbursable. Sponsors may designate a sharing table or stations where children may return whole items that they choose not to eat, provided that this is in compliance with local and state health and safety codes. These items are then available to other children who may want additional helpings. This practice may be facilitated by serving meal components so that they can be easily recycled. For example, if a sandwich is cut into halves and wrapped separately, a child can return an uneaten half to the sharing table. Please check with your local health department or food service codes regarding sharing tables. Where equipment is available, complete meals and non-perishable components that remain on a sharing table can be stored under refrigeration for subsequent service. Please note that all recycled food items must be stored in accordance with local health codes and must be documented. The form of the food should be suitable to the age of the children so that it can easily be consumed within the meal service period. For example, if fruit is cut into smaller pieces, it is easier for young children to eat. When it is not feasible to reuse leftovers or store food, FNS encourages sponsors to consider donating it to nonprofit organizations working to address hunger in the community, such as homeless shelters, food banks, and food pantries. Sponsors may also choose to send leftover meals or food home with children. Sponsors' policies relating to food donations must comply with state and local health and sanitation codes. Although donated meals, including non-reimbursable meals or meal components sent home with children, may not be claimed for reimbursement in the SFSP, food donation avoids unnecessary waste and can save expensive disposal and storage costs. Additionally, by collaborating with other hunger organizations, sponsors can expand the reach of these important programs and build networks that better serve the community. As a result of the Department's Food Recovery and Gleaning Initiative of 1997, a best practice manual was created which highlighted measures to provide unused food to needy organizations. In addition, the Let's Glean Toolkit was developed as a resource guide on food recovery programs for businesses, community-based organizations, private citizens, and public officials, and describes some of the food recovery activities taking place at that time and suggestions for new efforts. These publications can be found at the links located on the slide. If a site chooses to purchase additional food with SFSP funds, the food must be creditable food under the meal pattern requirements. Expenditures for foods that may not be served as part of the reimbursable meal based on the SFSP meal patterns are not allowable costs. Condiments served with creditable food are exempt from this restriction. Sites wishing to serve additional foods that do not meet SFSP meal pattern standards must use non-program funds. Sites with additional funds available are encouraged to use the funds to improve the reimbursable meals served by using fresher, healthier, more nutritious products such as fresh fruits and vegetables, lean meats, and unprocessed cheeses. In addition to serving meals that meet meal pattern requirements, sponsors must comply with the following rules when serving meals at each of their sites. Serve the same meal to all children. This means all children receive a meal meeting the meal pattern requirements, not that all meals must be identical in every component. Children with disabilities must be accommodated and therefore may not receive the same meal. Except where permitted by ODE-CMP, ensure that all children eat all meals on site. ODE-CMP allows items from the fruit or vegetable component of the meal pattern to be taken off-site. However, sponsors should allow this only at sites where there's enough staff to monitor this practice. Site personnel must supervise all children on the site while they are eating. Ensure that all children in attendance at the site receive one meal before any child is served a complete second meal or any adult meals are served. Adhere to local and sanitation regulations. Make adequate arrangements for food service during inclement weather if meals are usually served in an outdoor site. This could include an alternate indoor site, a shady spot for hot days, or discontinuation of meal service. Serve meals during the meal service times submitted on the site information sheet and approved by ODE-CMP. ODE-CMP must approve any changes in meal service times. Meals must be consumed on-site in order to be eligible for reimbursement. Exceptions to on-site meal consumption, meaning meals may be consumed off-site, include when a meal is served on a field trip with proper notification to ODE-CMP, or off-site consumption is otherwise approved by FNS. In extenuating circumstances, sponsors may allow off-site consumption of meals as long as meals taken off-site are not claimed for reimbursement. Failure to meet this congregate feeding requirement results in the disallowance of meals and may lead to determination of serious deficiency of the sponsor's operation of the program. However, sponsors may allow a child to take one fruit, vegetable, or grain item off-site for later consumption without prior ODE-CMP approval, provided this is in compliance with state and local health and sanitation codes. The food item taken off-site must be from the child's own meal or left on a shared table by another child who did not want it. Sponsors should only allow an item to be taken off-site if they have adequate staffing to properly administer and monitor the site and to ensure that issues particularly related to food safety and program integrity do not arise. ODE-CMP has been permitted to approve SFSP sponsors to serve suppers in place of lunches in certain circumstances, including where an area is eligible for the program, but sites, meal preparation facilities, or staff are not available for a lunch meal service, or an organization has developed late afternoon or evening programs for children in low-income areas to keep them occupied in the summer months, but do not have sufficient resources to provide children with meals. Therefore, ODE-CMP may approve a sponsor to serve supper in place of a lunch when it is feasible and appropriate. Except for camps and migrant sites, sponsors are not allowed to serve a supper and a lunch at the same site. Sponsors have the discretion to serve meals to anyone. However, only meals served to children may be claimed as reimbursable meals. Along with children ages 18 years and younger, SFSP regulations at 7 CFR 225.2 also defines children as persons over 18 years of age who are determined by the state or local educational agency or a local public education agency as having a mental or physical disability and who participate during the school year in a public or private nonprofit school program established for the mentally or physically disabled. Therefore, meals served to any person who meets the above definition may be claimed as reimbursable meals. Meals served to adults other than those provided for in 7 CFR 225.2 must be reported differently than those served to children depending on the classification of the adult served as either a program or non-program adult. Program adults work directly with the meal service at the site as either volunteers or paid employees. Meals may be served free to adults who meet this definition. These meals may not be claimed for reimbursement as a reimbursable meal, but may be counted as legitimate operating costs. Non-program adults do not work in any direct way with the meal service at the site, such as a parent or guardian. Sponsors have the option to serve meals to non-program adults at no charge or charge a fee for the meal. The cost of meals served to non-program adults may be counted as part of the sponsor's operating costs only if the adult pays or non-program funds cover the full cost of the meal and the money received is reported as income to the program. If meals are served to non-program adults, sponsors must either charge the adults at least the full cost of the meal, including food and non-food supplies, labor, and the value of commodities, or use other non-program funds to cover the cost of these meals. When using non-program funds to cover the cost of these meals, the sponsor may include those funds as a program income and pay for these meal costs from its nonprofit food service account. When a sponsor chooses to serve meals to adults, the following rules must be observed. All children, including any person who meets the definition of 7 CFR 225.2, must be fed first. Income from the sale of adult meals and non-program funds used to pay for adult meals must be documented as income to the program to offset the documented costs. And meals served to children, including second meals, program adults and non-program adults must be counted and recorded separately on the daily meal count form. The calculation of meal costs should be based on the full cost of producing the meal, i.e., food, supplies, labor, and other costs incurred by the sponsor. Sponsors should also include the value of the U.S. Department of Agriculture foods used to prepare the meal, or this value may be based on the current year annual entitlement per meal value of USDA foods. Serving family-style meals can help children develop good eating habits through the personal example provided by supervising adults. Camp and closed-enrolled sites offer the best setting for implementing family-style meals, provided that adults are available to assist children during the meal and staff and children are together for an extended period of time to provide a relaxed, stable environment conducive for teaching good eating habits. Family-style meal service should not be used at other types of sites. If family-style meal service is allowed by ODE CMP at camp and closed-enrolled sites, sponsors must ensure that enough food is placed on each table to provide the minimum portions of all required components for all children at the table in accordance with 7 CFR 225.16 and to accommodate program adults supervising meal service at the table if they eat with the children. Some amount of each required component is placed on each child's plate, and at least the minimum regulatory portion is offered to the child. This practice may be particularly appropriate when unfamiliar foods are being introduced. When a full portion required by regulations is not initially served to the children, supervising adults must assume the responsibility of actively encouraging the child to accept service of the full portion during the course of the meal. Sponsors are required to notify ODE CMP of all field trips that affect the time or location of meal service. Although formal approval of the alternative meal service is not a federal requirement, whenever sponsors plan field trips that may affect the time or location of meal services, ODE CMP must be informed. Sponsors are also advised to notify the food service vendor in advance of any trips, if applicable. It may be helpful for sponsors to provide a calendar of scheduled trips with the program application if trips are scheduled in advance. Sponsors must list the dates of field trips in the site info sheet in CMP Web. If there are any changes in scheduled field trips, e.g. additional field trips are added or scheduled field trips are canceled, sponsors must submit a revised site info sheet to include the field trip changes. If ODE CMP is not notified prior to the field trip, meals served may be considered consumed off-site and may not be reimbursed. Sponsors serving meals off-site also must carefully ensure the safety and quality of the meals by using adequate storage equipment to transport them. In addition, all sites participating in the program must arrange for delivery if the meals are not prepared at the site and arrange for storing the meals according to standard prescribed by local health authorities until mealtime. If the meals are not prepared on site, ODE CMP will not approve meal service at that site unless either meals can be delivered no more than 1 hour before the beginning of the meal service or proper facilities exist on site for storing food. Sponsors must establish meal times for each site and provide this information to ODE CMP. Therefore, when applying to participate in the program or providing annual updates to program information, sponsors must provide ODE CMP with information regarding the times of the meal service at each site. One notable mealtime restriction is that breakfast cannot be served after lunch. However, there are no regulations restricting meal service on weekends. Therefore, sponsors are allowed to serve meals through SFSP on the weekends with ODE CMP approval. Pending waiver approval from the USDA, at least 3 hours must elapse between the beginning of one meal service and the beginning of another meal service, including snacks. This is with the exception for sites serving both lunch and supper. In this instance, 4 hours must elapse between the start of lunch and the start of supper when no snack is served in between these meals. Additionally, the regulations do not permit supper meal service beyond 7 p.m. unless a state agency waives the requirement due to extenuating circumstances. However, with the exception of residential camps, supper must not extend beyond 8 p.m. The duration of the meal service is also established at 2 hours for lunch or supper and 1 hour for all other meals. If you have any questions, please contact your assigned child nutrition specialist. Thank you for participating in planning your summer food service program meal service training for the Summer Food Service Program. We greatly appreciate the work that you do to fuel Oregon's future.